Hello and good day from Norway. Hello, Slovenia. My name is Martin McGloin. I hope you hear me well from there. I'm calling from the Airthings offices here in Norway. My name is Martin. I'm the product manager for the Airthings for Business solution. And although I'm not a father, I'm very passionate and curious about the air that we breathe. And I know that I'm still learning. So I have my background is not with building automation or building control or ventilation. But the last 4 or 5 years I've been working with air quality, and I'm still learning unsettling things about how the air that we breathe impacts in the ways that it impacts my body and my brain, and that's what I want to talk to you guys about, and particularly where we breathe the most indoors. Now it is, as we've been hearing today in our conference, some breathing is something that's so vital to everything we do. We all take 28,000 breaths of air every day. Yet how often do you stop and think about what's in the air that you're breathing right now? And I think that becoming more concerned and conscious. I think a lot of people should be a lot more conscious about the air that they're breathing and the impact it has. So in the next half an hour that we have, there might be some inconvenient truths, some stark realities about how the air that we're breathing is impacting our bodies and our brains. And it is startling to think about how 9 out of 10 people in the world are breathing polluted air every day. So there are some grim realities, and I think we kind of need to be positive and hopeful about this as well. And at the same time, think that actually by increasing the awareness, by more people thinking and being more conscious about the air they're breathing, there is an opportunity to take control of our air and what we're breathing at where we live, we learn, and we work at home, in our offices, and at schools. So I really want to my journey into air. I want to start us off with probably the air event that's getting the most attention these days, or has been for the last few weeks. And that is, I want to take you to someone I was speaking to on the west coast of the United States. I recorded a little video with someone that's been living through the wildfires on the west coast of the United States to really feel firsthand what's the experience of realizing that you can't take the air that you're breathing for granted. So if we can play that video now, I have a little interview with Mimi Alkar, and then let's continue after hearing what she has to say. And while the technology is
Hi, I'm Mimi Alkar, and I am right now in Bend, Oregon, which is about 150 miles from Portland. And we have a home in Portland as well. And during the worst of the smoke season, I was in Portland. This has been worse than anything I've ever seen in my life. But you still can't go outside. And life was so hard, and you can't keep the smoke out of your house. As hard as you try, you open the garage door and then close the garage door, and then the garage smells like smoke, and then the house smells like smoke. And even, you can't see it, you can smell it, you know it's there. Eyes burning, always have a sore throat. It was just awful.
And what have you done? Have you done anything to protect yourself or your family at home, or made any changes with your building or your house?
Some of my friends put wet towels along the bottom of the doors, and we just closed all the doors and windows and tightened the house down as well as we could. But if you have to leave and go out and get in your car and drive somewhere, you open your garage door, like I said, and then the garage fills up with smoke. It actually hurts. You pull that into your lungs and it burns all the way down. And luckily, maybe not luckily, but we still are in such a terrible space for COVID that we all are wearing masks. But the mask that we're wearing might protect us from COVID, but the smoke gets through. You can't filter out smoke without an N95 mask, and none of us are allowed to have them because they have to be used by medical practitioners. So we're out with our cloth masks and doing the best we can and staying in if we can. But I have a dog. I have to walk my dog a couple times a day. So a couple times a day, I would just bind everything up and go out and do the minimum walk that I could do, and then get back in as soon as I could, because my eyes were burning, my throat is sore. Your nasal passages all the way down are just burning.
It's so. I was doing the interview with Mimi Alkar a couple of days ago over video in the evening from my home, and it's just such an emotional story to hear how someone's been living through the worst wildfire in the history of the Western coast. Some estimates say that the air quality now has been 10 times worse than at any other time during the wildfires on the Western coast. And I think it's easy, it's such a stark reminder for me as well, how we cannot take the air that we're breathing for granted. And it's easy for someone like me living in Norway to forget this, to forget that actually air is so vital to everything we do and how we live and how we breathe. Yet at the same time, it's so easy to forget about it. I think we've all, even before the wildfires, I think we've all come across news stories like these, detailing how the global air pollution, particularly outside, is a challenge. And the WHO, the World Health Organization, even estimates that 90% of the world's population are living in areas where the air is above the limit of what is deemed as healthy air. Yet keep in mind where Mimi Alkar was seeking refuge, inside her home. And how she was detailing to us how her friends and her family members were protecting themselves, taking towels, making the towels wet, covering up the sides of the windows, outside the doors, to keep themselves safe from the air outside. So if we're going to consider our homes, our buildings inside our safe haven, I think we need to shift our conversation. We need to, if that's going to be, and that's after all the place that we spend the most, we better concern ourselves with air quality inside our buildings as much. Let me try and make my point with Wales. So I have a friend in Airthings who has a favorite sad quote. Now, I don't know how many of you have a favorite sad quote, but this one is a bit challenging to wrap your mind around. So the quote goes like this: human beings, on average, we spend more time indoors than certain species of whales spend underwater. For all intents and purposes, we spend the majority of our lives indoors. By the time you're 40 years old, you would have spent 36 years indoors. We spend so much time inside that Velux, the Danish window manufacturer, have even gone so far as to brand us the indoor generation. Or actually, we are an indoor species. For all intents and purposes, our natural habitat is inside buildings. Thus, if we're going to concern ourselves with air quality, I think it's as important that we focus on where we spend our most time, and that's inside our buildings. So let's talk about inside air quality. And although I don't speak Slovenian, I've been listening into the seminar today. So I know there's been a lot of talk about what is in the air around us. Each of those 28,000 breaths of air that we take every day, they contain a lot more than oxygen. Now, I'm probably a bit more than average obsessed about the air around us, but the air is filled with hard to name, invisible components that I think few of you would think and reflect about each time you inhale. But we should, and this is exactly my point here. As you learn more and as you become more aware of this, you realize actually the air that we're breathing is impacting our bodies and our brains in ways that I didn't even think was possible before I got a bit more than average obsessed about air quality. So here are just 3 of the mind-boggling facts that I've learned or come across as I started my journey into air quality. Mind-boggling fact number 1: the air we breathe can impact our behavior. So scientists and researchers have found a correlation between the PM2.5, the tiniest particles in the air, and ozone in the air that we're breathing, and violent crime rates. Mind-boggling fact number 2, and this one creates a little bit of audience participation. So think about, how many of you have ever been run over by a car? I'm going to guess, I can't see any of you, I'm going to guess that it's the minority of you. But what I can say is that the majority of you have tiny pieces of car tires in your brain. So PM2.5, the tiniest particles, and we call them PM2.5 because they're less than 2.5 micrometers small. They're just a fraction of a strand of hair. They are so small that when you breathe them in, our bodily defenses are not able to breathe them out. It's the smallest particles, the ones that we cannot see, that are most dangerous. So when you breathe them in, they'll go through your lung tissue into your bloodstream. And because there's no other way to excrete them, they will get deposited in parts of your body, for example, your brain. Mind-boggling fact number 3: radon gas poisoning contributes to more deaths a year than home fires, carbon monoxide poisoning, and falling and tripping at home combined in any given year. Yet we all expect, we all demand that every building should have a smoke detector, a smoke alarm, and a fire system. Yeah, why do we not have the same expectations for radon gas detection? And I think radon is a great example. Because radon gas is an inert gas. We cannot see, smell, or feel it. And I saw some of the previous presentations already talking about it. And it really highlights our body's inability to detect the quality of the air around us. So but the effects that radon have on our bodies is far from invisible, because you breathe it in, and as the radon molecules decay, they release energy in the form of alpha particles. And these alpha particles, they just travel for like 9 centimeters, but they have enough energy to damage the DNA in your lung tissue, causing cancer-inducing mutations. So if the air around us, and radon was just one example of the things that we cannot see or understand, but if the air around us is hidden by all of these dangers, why don't we see them? Like even last time I was in McDonald's, I assume you have McDonald's in Slovenia as well, and I bought myself a cheeseburger. I got a full nutritional breakdown of that burger before I ate into it. So I knew exactly how bad it was for my body, but I could make an informed decision of whether I should eat it or not. And we expect that of our food, right? We expect to get all the ingredients, and we expect to get all the nutritional breakdown on everything we buy whenever we buy food. And all of us now, many of us, are walking around with fitness watches or smartwatches that count every step that we make, every heartbeat, that gives us the data, the insight, and the gamified competition to make sure that we can make the right decision to live a healthier, more fulfilling life. We know exactly how our activity levels impact our bodies. Why do we not have the same expectations or understanding for the air in our buildings? Why do we not demand, when we go into a school, when we go into an office building, that we get a full nutritional breakdown of the air in that building? That we do not get a full insight and data. Okay, how is the air that I'm breathing in this meeting room, in this office? How is the air that my children are breathing at school? How does that impact their health? Is that optimized for how they're learning? Yeah, we don't have, when we're so dependent on it, why do we not have this? And I think there's a shift happening here. And I think that shift is being driven on by what we're seeing with the global pandemic now. So COVID-19 has really made all of us to start thinking and reflecting what is in the air that I'm breathing. So I'm showing you some news stories here from the Netherlands. Now, I don't read Dutch, or I can't understand these news articles from the Netherlands. But the point here is that CO2 monitors are now selling out in the Netherlands. They're getting so popular. They're due to the reopening of schools. There's a huge demand to monitor the air, particularly CO2. And CO2 is a very interesting parameter to monitor because we all breathe out CO2. So it's a good indicator for how much of an other person's breath am I breathing now. So the more CO2 in the air, you're probably breathing more of other people's breathing. So it started out in the context of safely reopening schools, but then people started thinking, well, okay, we're finding quite a lot of CO2 here. What's happening? And how is that in itself? How is just the CO2 in itself impacting my children and learning? So I had an interview a few days ago with two guys that work with ventilation in the Netherlands to try and help me understand, okay, what's really going on and where is this shift in understanding amongst parents, schools, and teachers, and what's happening with air quality in the Netherlands. So if we could play that video now, that would be very good, and I'll continue talking about what's happening afterwards.
Hi guys.
Hey Martin, good to see you again. Marijn and Roland from Labots in the Netherlands.
The Netherlands is going crazy. I've been seeing news stories all over the place that CO2 monitors are just being ripped out of the stores, and that there's no more CO2 monitors possible to buy from the Netherlands. What's happening?
Yeah, that's true, man. You know, it's in the news everywhere since the whole COVID-19 situation. Last month only, we got about 20 news items in the national television, in the newspapers. Yeah, air quality is just a thing that's top of mind right now in the Dutch society. Every school in the Netherlands has to test their CO2 levels in the schools because last month the schools were opened again. Right now there is a team set up, like a task force, and they have to monitor all the schools in the Netherlands. So
manually.
Manually.
They have to visit the school with paper and pen, and then they have to go to a classroom and say, all right, there are 30 people in this class. This is the volume, and then they have to go through every class.
Yeah.
So there are parents who give their kids a desktop CO2 meter in the backpack. To measure inside the classroom without schools even knowing, because parents, they want to know that their kids learn and stay in a healthy environment. When you got a good chair, you got a good desk, why not breathe good air? There were rumors for quite some time that the air quality inside older buildings was not good, as known as the big sick building syndrome. But now, with the attention from COVID all over, the awareness reaches everybody.
Isn't that incredible? How parents are smuggling in CO2 monitors into school classrooms in the Netherlands to ensure that their children have the best environment for learning. And I think the last point that Margie made is very insightful. So the obsession with monitoring CO2 was a means to ensure that there was safe to reopen the schools, that you're not breathing in other person's breath to make sure there's sufficient ventilation. But then it creates a much wider awareness around the importance of air quality for learning and for children in the school. And CO2 in itself, actually, and we know this a lot more now, CO2 in itself impacts our cognitive abilities. So there's been some wide-ranging cohort studies in the Netherlands and also in Denmark, where they've compared a huge set of schools, looked at how the pupils are performing up against the ventilation and the air quality within the classrooms. They did a big comparison where they had the well-ventilated schools, where the CO2 levels were low, so lower than 800 ppm. And then they compared with schools that had twice the level of CO2. So an average classroom CO2 levels are around 1600 parts per million. So the numbers don't match up, but just say there's a low CO2 compared to high CO2 levels. And then they looked, so they had a big cohort, and then they looked at how are the students performing on the national tests. So on language tests, they found 6% fewer errors in the low CO2 classrooms compared to the high CO2 classrooms. On mathematics, it was 23% different in the errors on the math score. Now, it might not sound like a lot that you have this small differences on test score, but extrapolate that difference in educational performance with 13 years of education and the educational attainment gap you're looking at, I'm sure will impact their careers and for the rest of their lives. So the air in the building really does matter, and it's so important. Initially, now everyone started monitoring the Netherlands, and they realized actually we have a bigger problem here. Monitor and make sure that you have healthy environments for our children and for their learning. But it's not only at school where this is a challenge. And research have looked at how different pollutants, different components in the air impact us in the office as well. So a few months ago, I was, so before COVID, I was in the US at visiting some of our customers there with Airthings, but also at some of the conferences. And I got to meet Professor Edward Boyges. So Professor Edward Boyges works at the Syracuse University of Center of Excellence. And he was telling me about this seminal study that they conducted a few years ago called the KOG-FX study. It was together with Harvard University School of Public Health. And what they did is that they built a whole fake office building. Well, it looked real. So you can see it on the next slide here. You'll see inside this office building. And they made like a real modern day office environment where we're maybe used to working. But they had the ability to finely control the air quality in the office. They can control the levels of CO2, carbon dioxide, and the levels of VOCs, volatile organic compounds. The volatile organic compounds, these are the off-gassing emissions that we get from the choice in building materials or the decorations and furniture that we bring into an office building. So what they would do, they invited people in to do their normal work. So from 8 to 4 every day, people come in, did their normal work for 2 to 3 weeks. But every day after they finish their work, they would do an intelligence test, a cognitive ability test. And then, but each day they would also change the levels in the air of CO2 and VOCs from low, medium, and high. So they would change the levels of these pollutants in the air. They would change the air quality. And then they would look at how each day the people that were doing their normal work, how did that impact their cognitive abilities? And I think this really made us all aware of how the air quality in office environments has so much to say about their performance. So you see this on the slide here from the KOG-FX study. You can see the office environment. If we can show the slides. And then I can show you the results as well. So here you see this is from inside the KOG-FX study at Syracuse University in the US. And you can go to kogfxstudy.com and you get all of the public research papers that they publish on this. And the results were staggering. So comparing to the lowest levels of CO2 and VOCs, those days that the employees were breathing the best air and the score on the IQ test compared to the levels, the medium levels, like the expected levels in an office environment, they saw an overall improvement of 101% on the cognitive abilities. So a doubling of the score on these cognitive ability tests. But I think when it comes to the two skills that are most related to modern knowledge work, thinking creatively and strategically in a more tech-driven company, strategic thinking and information handling, we're looking at a 300% increase compared to when the air quality was low versus the high levels of CO2 and VOCs. There's just staggering results here that we can show on the slides now. So overall, cognitive abilities increase 101%. And the two strategic thinking and information handling, 300%. Nearly 300%. So keep that in mind the next time you have to make an important decision, whether it's for the Slovenian government, for your company, or maybe in the school that you're working. If you're going in to have a 2-hour-long meeting to discuss with your co-workers, you are probably better off making the decision before the meeting starts than waiting 2 hours in a stuffy meeting room where the area is not sufficiently ventilated, because your cognitive abilities would have been deteriorated and affected by the air that you've been breathing. So really the point that I've been making all the way through, and what we should be focusing on when it comes to our buildings, is that the buildings have such an impact on our health, our well-being, and our cognitive abilities. As an indoor species, that where our natural habitat is inside a building, we need to take this into account. I think it's really nicely our dependency on the building and the technical systems responsible for ensuring that it's a healthy breathing environment. I think it's really nicely summed up in this book recently published by Joseph Allen from the Harvard University called Healthy Buildings. It's a book I recommend all of you to order and read. But there he writes that the person who manages your building has a bigger impact on your health than your doctor. And I think that so nicely sums up the importance we have and the focus we should be giving to our building and our built environment to ensure healthy environments for our school and where we work and where we make decisions for government. Oh, sorry, my bad, yeah. Sorry. So so taking this into account, at Airthings where I work, so I do the product development at Airthings. We've developed, and we're cooperating now with MIK in Slovenia to bring a solution that makes it incredibly easy to start monitoring and getting control of the indoor environment in buildings, our office buildings. So we have the simplicity and ease of use. These are wireless, battery-operated indoor air quality sensors that monitor 7 parameters continuously. So they're battery-operated and they're wirelessly communicated to a gateway or hub. That makes it also very easy to integrate with these technical systems that are in the building. So for example, if you have a decentralized ventilation unit and you want to make sure that it's not wasting energy, but ensuring the optimal indoor air quality, you can then use the data from these sensors to control your MIKrovent units in a school or office building to ensure that you have the right balance between a healthy environment and also an energy efficient operating building. So installation wise, you're looking at a magnetic backplate. You plop it up on the wall. The data starts streaming wirelessly with a gateway that's running on a SIM card. And then you get access in the dashboard that you can see on the slide here to easily control and ensure that you have the lowest levels, whether it's CO2, whether it's VOCs. It monitors radon gas. It monitors temperature, humidity, pressure, even relative light. So with one simple IoT device, and this is really the beauty of wireless operated sensors now, it's so easy for us to retrofit. If you have old existing buildings, you don't need to make a big investment to get control of your indoor air quality, and that's what the ambition and the goal that we have with this system is similar to MIKrovent in Slovenia, and that's why it's such a great partner for us, because it allows you to easily retrofit existing buildings and ensure that you get great monitoring, and also that you can retrofit and get great air quality through decentralized ventilation in the buildings. And really the purpose and the drive that we have in Airthings and what we're trying to do on the global scale is that we recognize that the air that we're breathing is so much more important for our bodies and our brains than we realized. And we need to maintain a balance, because our buildings contribute to 40% of the global energy consumption and CO2 emissions. So if we're going to ensure a healthy balance between healthy buildings and sustainable buildings, we need to use technology and smart decentralized solutions like what MIKrovent is doing, like what we're doing in Airthings, together to accelerate the transition to sustainable and healthier buildings. Because really, at the end of the day, it requires all of us to start thinking and caring and reflecting more on the air that we're breathing all around us, and particularly inside buildings. So with that, I think I've come to the end of my presentation. It's been a pleasure to join you digitally here from Oslo, Norway. I hope the connection was okay. Put any questions, field them to MIKrovent, or get in touch with me if there's anything you want to know. But thank you. Back to Slovenia.